All right, I'm here with David Vanterpool, St Bonaventure legend, A10 legend, also former NBA player, also very successful assistant coach in the NBA. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me.
Obviously, I wanted to start with your time at St Bonaventure. You're one of the greatest players to play there. I know you came in, you were an All A10 on the All A10 rookie team. What was it like for you, just kind of thinking back in terms of your first year at St Bonaventure? And then obviously you go through a coaching change your sophomore year with Coach Barron coming in. But, what was that transition like for you, playing your first year at Bonnie's?
Well, I mean, my first year was, obviously coming into St. Bonaventure, they hadn't done well before I got there. And we had an influx of, I think it was 7 new players my freshman year. Or 8. 7 of us, I think, were freshmen. And Harry Moore, who was a Prop 48 the year before, was allowed to play my freshman season. So we had a bunch of new players, like kind of a new thing, new direction. Different, I guess, mentality is what they were trying to build. Coach Chapman was there, Alonia Tiny Green, who's recruited all over the place, especially in the New York area. Was able to get a bunch of players that to come up to Ole in New York. And for me, it was just an opportunity to I felt earn some playing time in a really good conference. And I worked my tail off. I came in as a 100. I think I was like 170 pounds, 6'5" freshman. And by the time we started the season, I was probably like 190. So like I had put on 20 pounds of muscle. My friends at home thought I was doing steroids or something when I got to school. So, I mean, I had to explain how I got big so quickly. But, the interesting thing is, I mean, we had a tough season my first year. I think we only won 10 games. So it was tough. We were all new. We were all very young. But it gave us a foundation to kind of grow and build something, even after we ended up having to get a new coach.
Definitely. And what was that transition like for you, with Barron coming in? And how was he able, for you just to kind of, again, it still was a young team at that point, to really kind of get you guys going in the right direction, but, just him as a coach and as a leader?
Well, funny thing about that, after my freshman year, and you mentioned I was, on the all rookie team, very honored to have that opportunity. But after our coach was fired, I was actually allowed to transfer without sitting out. Different transfer rules back then. I mean, now you have the transfer portal and people can, move around how they feel. But I would have been allowed to transfer without having to sit out a season, which was the rule back then. And after having made the A10 all rookie team, it was, some bigger schools and some suitors that were there. And it was a thought for me. But interesting part is Coach Barron and Joe Lombardi, who was his lead assistant, had recruited me to come to St. Francis while they were there early in the process before the bigger schools and the bigger conferences came in. And my mother loved them. So, it was interesting when he got that job, that position. One of the things that she, talked to me about was my commitment to the school, to the university, and, the fact that she already liked and had taken to Coach Lombardi and Coach Barron. And she was really interested and taught me more towards staying at St. Bonaventure. So I stayed pretty much because Coach Barron was there, to be honest with you. And I mean, it was great. I mean, he came in just with a gung-ho mentality, obviously being an alum. He had a history with the university and a heartfelt passion with it. And I know we felt that as players.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there, I mean, I don't know how far you went in the process, but, was there a school or two that, you felt like if Barron didn't come in, you would say, maybe would have ended up there?
There were a few schools, to be honest. And okay. I mean, even before I even went to St. Bonaventure, GW, Mike Jarvis had offered me a scholarship very early in the process, and wanted me to come bad. And even now to this day, when I'm around Coach Jarvis, love him to death. He calls me the one that got away all the time. He's like, the one that got away. And we laugh and joke about some of those times. But I had special years and a special time at St. Bonaventure. And I think it worked out pretty well for me. I think I made the right decision.
Absolutely. Definitely. And you mentioned Coach Jarvis and just, the Atlantic 10, obviously as a whole, a little different, or a lot different than what we have today, even in terms of this, the schools that you were playing with. What do you, remember most in terms of just, some of the players you played against, the style of the play in the A10 back then, but, what that was like, in the early mid 90s?
I think this, first of all, the style of play was a something to prove type of attitude, I think, for all of the schools. I think that we all each knew and had a lot of respect for each other as far as our ability and the type of players that we were playing against and playing with. Yeah. And I think that like a lot of the things that did not happen for all of the schools on the national stage was kind of a thorn in our side. So when we played teams from other conferences, when we played, I know we played a bunch of teams like in the Big East, so that were going to join the Big East. And my freshman year, we played at Notre Dame and won, which we weren't one of the better teams in the A10 at the time. My sophomore year, I think it was, we played at Seton Hall in the Meadowlands. We beat them out there. And I mean, it was like a big deal to make sure that we stood out in that realm. But in and around the A10, there was a lot of respect for, obviously, Temple. Temple was, perennial powerhouse. Coach Chaney was incredible. And from my freshman year on, they always had, nothing but NBA level talent with Eddie Jones, Aaron McKee, Rick Brunson. I think Batee was there at the time. Will Cunningham was their 5-man. So their whole starting 5 were NBA players. UMass, obviously, with Coach Calipari, grew into the power that they had there. And my early years, it was Tony Barbee and some of those guys were there. And then, obviously brought in Mike Williams, who was a freshman when I was a freshman, with Marcus Camby came in a couple years after I was there. Lou Rowe was a freshman when I was a freshman, and they were incredible. West Virginia was ridiculous, and they were in our conference. St. Joe's had Bernard Blunt, who was like probably the freshman of the year, I think his freshman year in the country as far as people were concerned. And they were always really good. You had Rutgers, which was good. You had, Rhode Island, which was always good. Al Skinner was the coach up there. I mean, it was a tough conference. And, I think we all respected each other and respected each other's level of talent, as well as being able to look at some of the other conferences and some of the other teams and some of the other players and say, we can compete on that level and make a statement for our conference when we had to play non-conference games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was doing a series kind of stories of Coach Chaney, but looking back and really seeing how he, just for the Atlantic 10 in general, obviously he's done so much, obviously rest in peace, he's a legend, but how much he did for the Atlantic 10 in terms of just going out. I know, like in '88, just playing everyone, anywhere, traveling, when there just wasn't much, respect for the conference at the time, or, late 80s. But no, it's awesome. Obviously you had such a great career. There's so many games we could, get into. One game obviously is the one always, talked about, even though it was a loss. But, were you fouled?
Yeah, Mike Williams, Uzi, love you. Rest peacefully. He and I have talked about this before. He's like, man, I didn't foul you. Yeah, it was marginal. I think it was definitely a foul, but I wouldn't have called it if I was a referee. Of course. So I'll say that, man, there's no way I would have called that a foul. So I think they made the right decision, but it was definitely a foul. I made sure to create enough contact that it was going to be a foul. So, luckily the shot went in. Probably wouldn't have gone in if we didn't have all that much contact, because I wasn't a great shooter. So I mean, making that shot was a big deal to push it to overtime. But I think what gets overlooked is the crux of the game, the entire game. And, the highlights are always, especially now, those are the things that people see most. But the game was such a back and forth game. And it was such a game that we led a lot of the way. And then they made a massive run and became like that number one team in the country look and feel. And we kind of bounced back through that. And we had the lead until Mike Williams, who hadn't hit a 3 the entire game, hits he's a big shot maker, makes a 3. I think he made 2 back-to-back threes to give them the lead by 3. So that's what set up that shot in the first place. And we were actually up and in a position to knock off the number one team in the country. And, in top level fashion, UMass did what they were supposed to do to even put us in a position where I ended up making that wild shot and sending it into overtime.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I went back and watched some of that game. And it just the environment. And, you could speak to that still even today. One of the hardest places to play, is going to St. Bonaventure. It does not matter how good, how great, how maybe not so good if it's an off year for St. Bonaventure. But what was it like just playing in that arena? And, how often do you get to go back, since you've left to see a game?
Oh, man, it was, first of all, it was great. The home court advantage is a real thing. I just was there about, I want to say 3 weeks ago. I went for Coach Schmidt has a Coaches versus Cancer golf outing, celebrity golf outing. And I went this year to support him, support that. Had my son with me. We went around campus and he went on a little visit. But that home court advantage is, had to be tops in the nation, I would think. More than anything, to start with the travel, just getting there.
Yeah.
Coach Chaney is notorious for having never stayed in Olean, New York. Not one time. They would fly in, really? They would land, they would get on their bus, they would drive down to the school, they would play their game, and they would drive right back to Buffalo and then leave to fly out if they could that night. And if not, they would leave the very next morning, but they would not stay in Olean, New York. And he made that a point that they would drive down, get off the bus, play the game, usually win because they were that good, and then go back to Buffalo. But just getting there is tough. So, you start with the travel, and then after you get there, the fans and the and the student body is always rowdy. They do their homework. They're on top of the opposing team, and they're passionate. So, that close-knit community, that close-knit university, it really helped us for sure at home. And especially, when Coach Barron got there and was really on us about being diligent about making it tough for the team once we crossed in between those lines.
Definitely. No, that's awesome. I do want to talk about just kind of obviously you had a successful pro career overseas. Also, you played a year in the NBA. You've been a very successful assistant coach as well. What for you was maybe the hardest, not hardest, but the most challenging, transition from a player to coach, if there was a challenge to that? What went into kind of that? That's a terrible question, but go ahead.
No. No, it's a great question. The wildest part, I think, is understanding that there is a major difference between playing and coaching. So, and I know, people think, oh, it's easier transition and you just flow from one to the next and certain things. But I think it makes it sometimes a little more difficult, partially because certain things that you could do as a player, other players are completely different people, completely different journey, completely different pathways, completely different space. So certain things that you could do, maybe they can't, or certain, I'm sorry, my dog is jumping in.
It's all good.
Or certain things that they can do, the way that they move, certain things that they are able to do or able to see is completely different. And then you got the game ever evolving or changing and different things happening. So trying to figure out and understand how to get a message across properly, or get a person outside of yourself to understand, okay, this may be the best approach for this situation. That may be the best approach for that situation. Understanding the work that goes into the studying, because as a player, you watch film that has already been broken down by the coach, who goes through a process, breaks down certain things, breaks down certain elements. You don't ever have to do that. You sit down, you listen to this coach that's telling you, okay, look at this, look at that. And then you look at it, okay, and you spend your 10 minutes with that. And then you go to practice for a couple hours at most. And the NBA is less time than that. Yeah. And then you're gone and you're about your day. Well, as a coach, it's ever evolving, and it's all day, pretty much every day, until you basically put it down. Like, you could work all day and night if you decided to, because it's always going to be something to do. I liken it to a teacher or professor. You have to prepare for class the next day. You have to prepare for, whatever the next test or game is coming up, and you have to make sure that the students are prepared. And that is what the job is. And it's wild. It's different
Yeah.
from being a player. And I've seen many top-notch players. I'll never forget being in a assistant coaches clinic kind of thing that Roy Sparrow and the NBA had put together for former players. And this is actually where I met Terry Stotts and how all that connection happened way back in, I think it was 2008.
Okay.
And some top-notch players there, Kenny Anderson, Robert Pack, and all of us were kind of learning how to relay this information, put it on a whiteboard, drawing up plays, putting players in this position, because we've seen it done a trillion times, but being able to actually stand up there and do it, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Let's see, hold on.